Welcome to Retro Fanfic Retrospective, the podcast where we dredge up old fanfiction and expose it to the cold, harsh light of 2020. My name is Amato, and with me are...
Tori.
And CJ.
And we're also joined by a drip outside that is apparently just going off of the house after this rainy day in Portland.
Yeah. Which may or may not turn up in our post audio, so...
Hopefully it's not picked up.
Yeah.
We're possibly blaming CJ.
It's my mutant power manifesting. I'm sorry.
Uncontrollable weather powers reflecting your feelings and emotions.
Yes, yes, and I think I need some guidance. I was thinking about maybe enrolling in school.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure where it would take you.
Yeah, I don't know either.
They stretch the definition of gifted youngsters, I feel like, with some of the X-Men, but once you get into your 30s, I'm not sure you're allowed to be a superhero anymore.
Dang it, really?
Or a student, which is the same thing.
I'll just be a janitor. I'll pick up what I can.
Yeah.
I mean...
Finish the mutant power equation on the blackboard when no one's looking. And they'll be like, who did this?
Well, we're talking about New Mutants today, and New Mutants of all X titles kind of had the best having a few humans around as supporting cast on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Like, you could work at the school, why not?
I mean...
You can keep a secret.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's nice to get some human representation in media.
I know. So yeah, we're talking about a New Mutants fanfic today. Not just X-Men, but New Mutants specifically, like the old New Mutants. Like the good New Mutants. The Claremont and later Louise Simonson New Mutants. And I suppose we should ask what background we all have with that particular title.
Well, for me, New Mutants-wise, not much. I'm a big X-Men fan. But I've had very little exposure to the New Mutants, so I had a lot of fun homework to do.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I do know that there's supposed to be a movie.
Yeah, I had this fanfic kind of in mind for a long time, because it's one that I read a long time ago. We'll come back to that. And it was good. I wanted to reread it. And I was like, oh, well, we'll never make it before the movie comes out. And then the movie was pushed back. And then I didn't get around to it again. Then the movie was pushed back again. And so what do you know? We are able to talk about this before the New Mutants movie comes out.
Amazing.
Meant to be.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried about that movie, to tell you the truth. It seems to have been stuck in development or, hell for some time.
I watched the trailer for it, and it's kind of like a horror movie. I was kind of surprised. At least that's what the trailer
No, that seems to be what they're going for. And that's, like, early New Mutants had a lot of horror in it. Not exactly the same genre they're going for here, but, like, it's kind of famous for trippy horror stuff in some of the early storylines. I'm still surprised that's the direction they went with it. Like, I still wouldn't have expected that, actually, in... the movie adaptation. I'm kind
of excited about it, though. It's a new way to look at it. This whole, how many X-Men movies do we have now? And now,
I remember 2.
Yeah.
2?
Yeah, that's as many as I've seen.
I think there's a lot more.
I think
remember
there's 6.
X-Men and X2.
There's Wolverine.
And after that, I'm pretty sure the franchise ended.
Yeah, I think you're right. But now that Marvel owns the property again, they're going to start over, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's so popular.
Yeah.
So I was kind of excited to see, like, a different take. Like, seeing people manifest all these strange powers would be kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
I am so hoping if they still have Ilyana's powers teleport people directly through hell to get anywhere. Like,
right.
that's what I want from that movie, is for them to, like, use that power and gradually realize, like, what exactly they're doing each time they, like, invoke it.
Oh my gosh.
And, it'd be so good. That's what I want from a horror New Mutants, is for her to not know that. In the comics, you never get that because, like, weird time shenanigans, she basically grows up in the hell dimension, right? But, like...
I'm kind of excited, by the prospect of kind of that, new genre stuff. Like, that's a great idea there, Amato. But, Legion did that whole, that TV show did, that whole trippy psychedelic thing. I really liked what they did with, well, I don't want to spoil it, but they treated a lot of mental illness in it, and they kind of brought the genre to a little bit of a different, like, more real place and less action-y.
Yeah, I can imagine the New Mutants movie having a similar tone if they did it well.
Which I think is great because, I mean, you know, if you go back and look, especially I think at X-Men, that's a lot of what was going on in, like, the 80s and the 90s is, like, people trying to make being a mutant kind of more like a more real thing and involve like the elements of horror or psychology, mental illness, I guess, that were
Because if you're dealing with multiple characters with different personalities and backgrounds, not everybody's experience is going to be the same, so it's exciting to see a movie possibly reflect that. So
totally.
Yeah.
Well, going back to background, I grew up on Chris Claremont X-Men, and it was just because I liked Nightcrawler, and so I got things with Nightcrawler in it. And I the one subscription to I don't know how it ended up happening. It must have just been like running into issues at like friends' houses or in like old, boxes at comic book conventions or whatever. But like the one thing I subscribed to as a kid was the reprints of Claremont X-Men in the early 90s, the classic X-Men series, or maybe it was X-Men Classic. Those were two different titles. X-Men Classic. And I subscribed to that up until it ended and I got shifted over to What If. But what was I saying? So like I ran into the New Mutants peripherally back just from reading those kinds of titles and picking up old issues of stuff. And later I eventually went back and reread it, at least up until it started transforming into X-Force, which is, I mean, the fanfic we're about to read is sometimes they call it a fix-it fanfic, where like the title took a turn that the fans did not like. And what do you know, this fanfic picks up just before the series took a turn that fans did not like. Just about right that time. It's definitely set in like 1987 before the whole like Bird Brain arc. And that's significantly before things started getting into like Cable and X-Force-y kind of stuff and being passed off of like out of the hands of the old creative teams into the new ones. I don't know how much that means to you all, but Tori, New Mutants.
Yeah, actually, like, very little background with New Mutants. I read a lot of Uncanny X-Men, so I'm more familiar with Claremont, but I don't... it's very possible that I read some New Mutants here and there, but it would have been so long ago. I definitely had to do a lot of like research just to pick up on who the characters were for this. But, there's so much X-Men information, like there's so much story out there. So I feel like I've definitely like absorbed some of the things peripherally just from being aware of superhero comics. But it really kind of I came into this not really knowing the characters very well. So I'd be interesting to hear like someone's experience with the characters and how they might be different in this fan fiction.
Yeah, I'm no expert. I'm more Uncanny and early Excalibur than New Mutants in like what I'm really familiar with. But I know quite a bit of it and I have read it all. And it's really interesting having both of you going into this fanfic pretty unfamiliar with the New Mutants, because we have like that's where the character's coming from too, right? Like they have to like introduce the character to everything at the start of this.
Well, yeah, and this is actually pretty great because like I wasn't sure at first if the character was the author's creation, but it like seemed pretty clear. But I was like, maybe it's a character I know because I don't know the characters. But it is a great way to introduce all the other characters. Like I didn't feel like I needed a background in New Mutants at all to get this.
Yeah, the author did really well. And
it's like, are you familiar with Magneto? Then you're probably good to go.
I know, I felt like they would describe something that was probably pretty obvious for the fan base, and I was like, ooh, I know that. I felt good about myself.
Totally.
Yeah, the fanfic we're reading today is Kid Dynamo. It is a novel, and it's been a while since we read a fan novel. But for today, we're trying a new thing. We're only going to read and discuss the first half of it today, and then we'll actually be able to make predictions, high school English class style, and see where the author was going with it when we come back next week to finish it off.
Awesome.
This is a real classic fanfic. It was published in an APA in the late 80s. Are you familiar with APAs?
No.
They're like a zine where you only get a copy if you contribute to the zine. That's the basic idea, an amateur publishing association, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was apparently originally published in the ex-APA magazine in late 80s. and then it was posted to Usenet in 1992, which still makes it super early internet fan fiction.
Totally.
For this genre. And so it's famous both because it was really, really early and because it was pretty well received. And I'm happy that we're getting to go to it.
Yeah, it's pretty well written.
According to fan lore, such was the popularity of the story that it was the only fanfic included in the FAQ for the Rec Arts Comics Marvel X-Books news group.
Wait, what? Say that again.
I mean, it was like the only fanfic recommended by a news group, like the main X-Book discussion, FAQ, whatever. Somewhat famous among certain quarters. At this point, probably no one remembers it. But I ran into it re-archived on the Pride and Wisdom fanfic archive as a kid, which was focused on shipping Kitty Pryde and this character from Warren Ellis's run of Excalibur that no one cares about anymore. But it also had like sections for like General Excalibur and like New Mutants and like other X-Men and stuff. Sounds
so niche.
It wasn't that niche at the time because it was
Really?
like actually kind of ongoing.
Do they have any crossover of the...
Well, it had different sections. And so it had
I
the
see.
section of fanfics about that, but it also had some other stuff. It says Pride and Wisdom were like Kitty Pryde's last name and Pete Wisdom's last name. That was the name of the archive.
Yeah.
No longer up on the internet. You can find a link to Kid Dynamo via Wayback Machine at bit.ly/RFR Dynamo, which is spelled Dynamo. And I should probably mention the title of the author. The name of the author is Connie Hirsch, Hirsch. I think that's how you say it. And so, ready to jump into it?
Ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
Then, can we just start us off about how this story opens up?
Yeah. It is written in the first person, from the point of view of a teenage runaway girl who goes by the name of Jessica. And she is not doing great. She is homeless, but is working to get out of that state. She's living at a boarding house. And her mother has died. And she's walking along, and she notices a car is following her. And she tries to play it cool and turn around a corner to get away from the car and start running. But there's another car waiting there for her, and she is kidnapped, essentially, by people who are posing as some kind of authority.
Yeah,
the FBI.
Introduce themselves as the FBI, and they're actually, what's the organization? The Right? Is this a different one?
The Right.
Yeah, and they're one of like those anti-mutant, hate groups in the Marvel universe that are all pretty much the same, but sometimes they have different names. That kind of thing.
They're all, pretty much the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, and she doesn't resist because she doesn't want to draw any more attention to herself.
Yeah.
Which is intriguing.
It seems like, she fully believes this is actually the FBI, so...
Until
they, make her pass out in the backseat of the car.
And becomes very clear. And, she's, captured but she's saved by the New Mutants, the characters from the Marvel title, the New Mutants, who are, if you're not super familiar with this part of X-Men continuity, they're, younger students who are more supposed to be students than, the X-Men were at the time. Who are, studying at Xavier's. And they end up having to do superheroing all the time or choosing to do superheroing all the time because that's how superhero comics work. But they're not really supposed to be doing that kind of thing. And their headmaster at this time in continuity is not Charles Xavier. It is Michael Xavier. Is that right?
Michael
Xavier. Which is to say it's Magneto.
The master of magnetism is himself.
Yeah, as they put it frequently in this story, which is maybe the only part that I really couldn't take very seriously is when they would call him the master of magnetism.
It slowly became my favorite part. I was waiting for it.
Well,
Totally.
They make this point that he carries himself so almost pompously with such charisma and poise that it's yes, he is the master of magnetism.
Right. Yeah, it's a double entendre, right?
Yeah.
And I just like to say this is probably my favorite incarnation of Magneto. And Claremont had put a lot of work into getting him to this point.
Sure.
Having a heel face turn. And then, but kind of letting that simmer for a long time before he was kind of brought in as an ally to the X-Men, and eventually, Xavier had to go into space or whatever for his love life reasons or whatever.
As you do.
And, you do. And, he turned over the school to him.
Everyone loves a reformed villain.
And, obviously it doesn't stick, but it's just one of those, it's one of those superhero title things, right? Where like a future, no, actually, he did his back to heel turn while Claremont was still writing towards the very end of his run, I think. But then, like, I forget. He bounces back and forth. I think he's basically with the X-Men again at this point in Marvel, but...
For the sake of the fanfic, he definitely is.
Yeah.
He's even
He's
taken on the
earnestly
fake
giving a
surname.
try to non-violence and, like, raising and protecting the next generation of mutants.
Yeah.
Instead of blackmailing the world or forming ironically named, organizations of mutants or whatever.
And he's even tolerating a few actual humans at the mansion hanging out, so...
Well, he seems, like, from this author's perspective, like, weirdly, like, fully reformed in that he, like, loves humans now and he regrets his actions, but not super remorseful about anything he did, which I feel like is actually, like, I don't know how New Mutants takes this tact, but... Because he doesn't feel he does feel remorseful, but he's like, oh, but I felt like I had a noble goal or something, so that makes it somehow better than people who have evil goals.
Yeah. I actually thought that worked really well, and I thought he came off more remorseful than I would.
Yeah, and he doesn't. He doesn't absolve himself of responsibility of a lot of that stuff either. He's like, I have to live with that. At least I can live with the fact that, like, I thought I was doing good, which is more than I could.
Right.
But, like,
and then, like, everyone else agrees with him, except our protagonist, which we'll get into. Yeah, but it makes him a lot more, like, it kind of just, like, cuts through the whole, like any questions the reader might have about where he's at now. They're like, all right, yeah.
Well, that's where he was in the comics.
We don't have to think about it anymore.
He was earnest.
Yeah.
And he was acquitted by an international court of law, mostly on the basis of, like, most of the really terrible stuff he did was before he was regressed to a baby and, regrown to an adult.
Sure.
And so, they were like, that makes him basically a different person, right?
I guess.
I mean, who knows?
Anyway, so the New Mutants basically busted in Saver from the right. And we should probably do a mutant roll call here just to make sure, like, we've got everybody, right?
Yeah.
The New Mutant at this time, it's Magneto. He controls magnets or something. He can do all kinds of stuff.
The master of magnetism, Amato.
He's just magnetic in every way.
We've got our co-leaders who are Danny Moonstar, who never actually gets to use her powers once in the entire part of the fanfic that we read. Mm-hmm. She almost does once.
She does in the training room.
Oh, does she? But she's fighting robots.
And she manifests a horse, her Pegasus, when the spaceship...
Her Pegasus is because she's a Valkyrie, though, not because she's a mutant.
Right.
Oh, see, I thought she was just manifesting it.
No. She's just got a Pegasus because she's a Valkyrie.
That's awesome.
Which is something that happened when they were in Asgard.
Right, which I didn't know happened until the last chapter that we read for the day. So.
Yeah.
And
anyway, I sneakily read ahead, so I knew that's where her Pegasus came from. But
yeah, she's got psychic things where she can manifest someone's greatest fear or greatest desire, which is like a pretty effective spot psychic attack.
She does do that at the prom.
Oh, at the prom, I guess she does. Yeah, you're right.
Briefly.
No, you're right.
But anyway.
And she's co-leader. The other co-leader is Sam Guthrie, who's Cannonball, who he's nigh invulnerable when he's blasting, and he's a good kid. They're mostly all good kids.
He's like from Kentucky. He's got a little bit of drawl.
Yeah. Who else do we have? We have Rain Sinclair. She turns into a wolf or a werewolf form, and she's Scottish and Catholic.
She writes her own fanfic or something.
Wait, no, she's not Catholic. She's extremely Protestant. I'm sorry.
Right.
She writes her own fanfic. What was that?
Oh, no, her own stories. She writes her own stories.
That's right, like fantasy and stuff.
Yeah.
We have Amara, whose backstory is complicated, but basically she's Roman, like from the Roman Empire. And don't worry about it.
Didn't really get that.
She turns into magma. She controls magma.
That's some context that's useful to know now.
We've got Doug Ramsey, who speaks all languages and, like, fluently, instantly, and he was killed off before his powers would make him the most powerful person in the world because he does computer languages.
Yeah.
But it's okay, he was resurrected, and now he's the most powerful person in the world. They just kind of forget about it all the time.
And he has an awesome name, Cypher.
His powers are just that he speaks all languages fluently, and that includes computer languages, so he can just he just can do
They
computers.
didn't mention that in this fanfiction.
They did.
But
they did.
oh, they did.
Yeah, that's the
Oh,
only
okay.
reason I know.
It comes up.
Oh.
It's just like
Yeah, it's just kind of like
Actually,
whatever.
Do
It's
you
ladies.
remember him as a character?
yeah, I mean,
I didn't
all of these characters
associate
showed
it,
up in
yeah.
Uncanny and Claremont. It's just like they
Right.
were usually more background.
That's true. Yeah, I just remember Cypher because he was
Cypher,
like.
because he's awesome. I mean, everyone's pretty awesome.
It's a great
And
name.
Speaking of
and
awesome,
it's pretty awesome.
we've got Ilyana Rasputin, who is my favorite, and I'm so glad that she gets to just be around being Ilyana Rasputin in this fanfic.
Colossus's sister.
Yeah. And she grew up in a, alternate timeline hell dimension, which she's also the magical ruler of, and she's got huge
Yeah.
magical powers in that dimension and not much magical powers in our dimension, but she can also teleport people to and from that dimension.
Right.
That also involves time travel sometimes, mostly accidentally because of the weird time shenanigans going on. And it's all pretty great, but mostly she's great just because she's like, she gets to be the sarcastic one, or like the...
She's got an attitude. It's great.
Right.
Yeah.
She's got this, very teenage stance of just like, she's a little bit too cool for anything that's going on most of the time.
If you're queen of your own pocket universe, I mean,
She's like the gothiest person who doesn't wear black. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I don't think they mention whether she wears black in this fanfic. So,
I don't remember her ever
maybe.
wearing black. It's just not her.
Well, I'm just
colors.
saying.
Yeah. She could be.
She could be in this.
and her like superhero name is Magic with a K.
Magic with a
Great.
K.
Yeah.
And so Jessica's brought back to, Xavier's to recuperate and stuff, mostly under the auspices of, who's their nurse? Is their nurse Sharon? No, Sharon's not the nurse. There's another nurse, right?
Stevie.
Stevie. Is Stevie acting as the nurse?
Sharon was acting as
No,
nurse.
Sharon. Oh.
Yeah,
Okay,
Sharon-
never
But
mind.
Stevie later when
Yes.
she takes a tour.
Yeah, we've got
Oh, right,
Sharon,
Stevie's the
Stevie, and
dance
we've got
teacher,
Sharon's
sorry.
husband, whose name I forget, who are kind of like the humans working at the school.
Tom.
Tom. And it's weird for me to like think about these characters, and like I did a little digging. I was like, what did happen to Stevie Hunter? Because it felt so natural reading this fanfic that like Stevie's around, she's an important character, but basically the authors forgot about her for like, a decade, and before she
Yeah.
everyone was like, oh, someone who remembered her was like, let's resurface her, and she became like a senator. I don't know.
That's
Good
funny.
for her.
No, I
Yeah.
think House of Representatives.
Okay. Sure.
Anyway, she's a former professional dancer turned dance instructor because she got injured.
Yeah.
And Sharon and Tom kind of just like are groundskeepers for the most part, but Sharon I think is also a nurse of some kind. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and because of the exact point we are in continuity, Bobby and Warlock are not present. They're off in a spin-off title called Fallen Angels for 8 issues, which is going to cover the entire duration of this fanfic.
So the author was pretty precise about when this took place.
It's quite precise. I'm sure they
Yeah.
were more precise than I am because I couldn't tell you what issues exactly this takes place between, but I'm sure the author would have been able to tell me that. And so, anyway, they're trying to be hospitable and stuff. The first main roadblock and the kind of one of the primary go-through lines of at least the first half of this fanfic that we've read is that Jessica here, or at least she's going by Jessica, that's, an
Yeah.
assumed name, has a personal grudge against Magneto, specifically Magneto.
Yeah.
Understandably. I mean, and not unexpectedly.
Yeah, we get pretty quickly because Magneto.
Yeah, we can lay out the situation.
Yeah, messed up her mother.
Her mother was a former member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, apparently, when it operated in Europe for a little while pre X-Men continuity.
Yeah, she was like an anarchist and.
And she was a fire power mutant.
Yeah, she went by the name of Firefall and is apparently not, from what I can tell, a real character.
She's
But
not
is made
canon.
up for this.
She's real. She's real in my heart.
Yeah, like Firefall
Just
is.
the fire burn.
It's like such a mutant name. Like,
It's a good name.
I'm like, I seriously was like, that's definitely a
I
real
know.
mutant. Like, that's gotta be. No.
And
I was
and
pretty impressed with
So
Yeah.
So the backstory is that Magneto did some kind of experimental, power boosting treatment on her that kind of worked, but it sort of made her powers, spiral out of control over the course of many years. And eventually she died in a hospital, having lost control of her powers completely and incinerating herself.
Yeah, she basically cooked herself from the inside, giving her daughter an aversion to cooked meat.
Yeah,
God.
yeah.
It's really gross.
Jessica's a vegetarian now because of the smell of her mother burning to death, which is, I don't know, it doesn't seem as dramatic when it's kind of laid out just in little bits and pieces, but when you put it all together, it's like, my god.
She tries not to play it up, but
Yeah.
she's been through some heavy shit.
Totally.
Yeah,
And
when it's revealed, it takes some time to get to that point, but when you do get there, you know enough to be like, oh man.
And
I know,
we can
yeah.
jump ahead in terms
like
of
a
all of
drip.
this backstory too. That like we read through chapter 6, right?
Yeah.
Later in conversation with someone else, Magneto says, yeah, I didn't actually do anything to her mom. It was a placebo. But that doesn't absolve me of responsibility because, like, I didn't, by not giving that information to her, it probably hurt the doctors who were actually trying to help her, who were actually, like, looking for causes that were not
Right.
there by,
Yeah.
like, this treatment that I supposedly did.
Yeah.
And so that's why he's not even telling, like, Jessica about this. It's like that would be like me trying to make excuses when really, like...
Yeah.
I was
Like,
totally
he
at
really
fault.
fucked up.
Yeah, I really fucked up on this.
We learn at the same time with this mother backstory that Jessica has an ability to withstand heat,
Yeah.
which is why, and she was playing
That-
kind of
Yes.
nurse for her mom during her last few years. And
That's her stated mutant ability, is that she
In the
is immune to
beginning.
heat.
Yes.
And also, apparently, as a byproduct, is always a perfect temperature. She says
Yeah.
she never sweats, like, from exertion or whatever, because, like, her body just, like, maintains the temperature it wants to be at.
And she can never get a tan.
Yeah, she can never get a tan. I know that was one of my favorite. Like, she's immune to like radiation. She can't get X-rayed. I don't think she knows about lasers at first, but that she learns later on that she is immune to lasers. Anyway, the greatest part is like it gives her a lot of little character quirks. Like she likes to drink things that are boiling hot. Like she just finds it to be more like it's better to her. I don't
She's
know.
like, oh yeah, it's boiling. You're like, okay, yeah. Must taste better.
At least once, Doug tries drinking the coffee that she was drinking, and she told him, like, careful, it's hot. But, like, she also can't quite understand how hot it is compared to, like,
Right.
Yeah.
what somebody else would withstand, because she has no way to relate to that, really.
She would probably have some memory because most mutant powers don't manifest until like puberty.
Right.
Right.
It's probably true.
Anyway, yeah.
Anyway,
That's a good point.
So that's the thing. And so Magneto kind of convinces her to give it a shot staying there because, he wants to nurture and protect the new generation of mutants. And he's like, look, you can hate me, that's fine. That doesn't mean that it's not a good idea for you to be here instead of out where, like, horrible anti-mutant bigots are attempting to actually murder you or whatever.
Because this organization had tortured her for days.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to just let her die if she had not been found. So
Right.
he's like, there's a real threat. They found you pretty easily and you were basically off the grid already. Like, maybe you should stick around. Give it a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She eventually accedes to that.
Yeah.
And partly it's because, Magneto aside, there's, like, some people who've been nice to her and, like, she can actually, like, talk to people about what's actually up with her, which is a new and novel experience. And people her general ballpark age.
Yeah, and also the fact that apparently, people are after her and she was like homeless and she's underage, so it's not DHS, but it's some other acronym that stands for DHS is if they find her, they're going to take her into foster care. She's very close to turning 18, like only a few months, but she's like, this is a lot safer. I won't have anybody like, I won't be homeless. I won't have anybody like looking for me and throwing me into the foster system. So.
And she'd run away from her last foster home.
Right.
So.
And so we have an initial first part of the fanfic, which is her kind of, like, getting to know the other characters. It's all pretty pleasant, and, everyone is nice people, so, like, even though they have their own personalities, it's all, like, mostly pretty pleasant and stuff. Anything we want to say about that kind of initial part? I do like, I gotta say, like, Ileana's one of the ones who comes in to talk to her early, just, like, on the bedside. And I like that part where it's like, yeah, Ileana summarized her backstory, basically, which, involved, like, living 10 years in Hell Dimension and, like, demon lords, and I took it all with a grain of salt.
Yeah. I liked that line too.
She's just like, okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I have to say that, I think if you know New Mutants a little bit better, like, a lot of these characters, like, it would have been pretty funny, like, how they laid themselves out at the beginning, but, like, it a little bit flew by for me. I was like, oh, okay. It was a lot of,
it's a lot of characters,
information,
right?
right? But, Jessica really stands out because it's all, like, as we mentioned, it from her perspective, and she has a lot of flavor in her dialogue. Like, she really states her opinion about most things and uses a lot of, like, turns of phrase that give you an idea of who she is. So I feel like this author like laid out her personality really well at the
How would you
start.
describe Jessica's personality?
I think that she's kind of like, you know, no nonsense. She's a little defensive. She,
A little bit defensive in private and like independent,
yeah.
and this is all from her life
Independent,
circumstances.
yeah.
But it's not like those define all her actions, but like she's consciously kind of making an effort to like, you know, reach out a little bit to these people. That's something she has to be conscious of.
She's a bit of a jokester. She's like good-humoredly sarcastic at times.
Sarcastic is a great word.
And I saw that as a distinct difference between her and Ileana. Like, she's sarcastic, but she's got a softer side than, say, the other character. And I felt really grateful toward the author while reading the first couple of chapters because I didn't know these characters very well. And I was, like, kind of just taking it in and being like, okay, I guess this is what the characters are like. But, yeah, I not having the background, I think that she really detailed all the characters really well and gave me an idea of who they were.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to go and do a lot of deep research to try and figure out what was going on.
Totally, yeah.
So.
I mean, it helps. You know, they're comic book characters. They've got stuff going on, but for the most part, they've also got personalities you can summarize pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, Rain is like the naive one. She's also the youngest. It's actually interesting how much their ages vary.
Yeah.
Like, I think Rain's 14 and, like, Sam is 19.
Yeah.
Like, I think there would be a temptation in, like, a teenage book to be like, everybody's, like, 16 or 17.
Right.
just to, like, make things easy. But they don't. Oh, yeah, there's another character who I don't remember where she's at this point in continuity, but Sean's not there, whose name is Karma. I think her code name is Karma. And she's the queerest character, so I'm sorry she's not there, but...
Yeah, wow. Yeah, this is kind of an unfortunately heterosexual story, even though Magneto is so clearly gay. I don't know what the author was thinking.
I mean, yeah. I like, one of the doujinshi I'm sitting on is definitely just Magneto, Charles, like, slash.
They're so hot for each other.
Especially in this
We
era
all
where
know
it's
that's
like...
true love.
where it's like our deep friendship and, you know, background with each other have, like, led me to, like, change my entire lifestyle and, like, philosophy. And Charles is just like, I'm off to space.
Bye.
See ya.
Yeah, like I would
With my hot alien girlfriend.
Take care of these kids. Bye.
I would have liked to see more heartbroken Magneto.
Yeah, he seems to be coping with that pretty well. Yeah,
he's just stoic. He's just holding it in.
Yeah, mostly. But you're right.
Yeah.
The extent that she's holding things in, it's like he's not stoic about like, oh, I miss my friend. He's stoic about like, I don't actually feel qualified to do this, but I'm just going to compensate by trying it really hard and appearing.
I mean,
he does try it really hard.
Magneto's characterization is really interesting in this because he's like this weird mix of like everyone describes him as hot and apparently he's in his 60s or at least 60.
Don't worry about it too much. He turned into a baby for a while. Like he's supposed to be silver hair, right? He's a silver haired gentleman.
I thought he was a little younger than 60, but then Stevie says he's twice her age, so that would make him 60 because she's supposed to be 30.
Well, this probably takes place when it was written, which would be about 87, 88, right? And he's a Holocaust survivor.
True.
And so thinking about his backstory, that's probably about accurate in terms of like number of years he's been around.
Right.
His physical body, who knows? Like,
who knows?
He went through some weird stuff.
But yeah, he's described as like, you know, suave and attractive. But then when you see this narrator, actually this narrator is a little weird. If I really want to go into that, seems kind of is omniscient despite being most of the time in first person.
Well, wait.
But
I
when you get inside his head.
When was that? There are some parts that are third person, right?
Yes. There are some parts where Jessica was not there, so they're clearly written in third person.
Right.
But I guess it's not super clear. Like sometimes you have Magneto on his own, so I guess that is a change of POV.
It's not strictly Jessica's point of view.
Yeah, you're right. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Speaking of Jessica's point of view, I found it, and maybe it was written this way on purpose, but I found it confusing that Jessica has so much hatred for him, And at the same time, there's all these like lusty descriptions of him from her
Yeah.
perspective. It made me a
Super
little
weird.
She's
uncomfortable.
like, this asshole's really hot.
Like, this silver fox jerk face.
Who killed my mom?
Yeah. I guess that's kind of what I was trying to speak to there, is that, yeah, it's really unclear. But
It's
then
a little
sometimes
weird.
we get into his head, and he's, like, kind of just really awkward in his own head. He's like, I don't really know what I'm doing with these kids.
I'm winging this mother
I
hen
hope
thing.
I'm doing it,
Right.
you know? But he's very reserved. So it's interesting to see his actual actions, which are like mostly just being so reserved that no one gets much off of him, appearing out of nowhere, and then kind of being like, I'm trying here, guys. Inside his head where he's like anxious about it, and then Jessica's perspective being like, he's evil and hot, and the other people's perspective of like, he's magnanimous and hot. You get kind of this really interesting
Magnetic.
magnetic,
Indeed.
yes.
He's
He is
everything that
the
starts with
master of
Magnus.
magnetism.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know. There's Magnus, Magneto, Master of
Magnesium.
Magnetism. Yeah, probably at some point.
Anyway.
Our next major kind of source of conflict comes with they convince Jessica to go in the danger room because like everybody's got to do it. Like even Kitty had to do it when she came. Like Cypher has to do it even though he has no combat powers or
Poor
particular
guy.
physical powers. Well, that's
Right.
he always has a bit of a complex about that in the comics, which is reasonable when you're next to like somebody who turns into living magma and like somebody who flies through the air and punches through walls and can't be hurt doing that. And he's like, I can speak Swedish fluently. Which,
Whenever I want.
like really, he should just be behind a computer doing ridiculously useful things all the
Yeah.
time. But like, because they're not even supposed to be superheroes, they're just like sneaking out all the time to do it. It's not just like, Doug, you stay behind.
I mean, there is a practicality in it. Like, at the very least, if we're attacked and you're with us, you should at least know how to throw a punch, I guess.
He gets that amount of training. But
Yeah.
but he's also not someone who's talented at it in
No.
particular. Like, so whatever.
I
Anyway,
love his character for that, too. He's just this, like, sunny jokester kid who's like, I don't really belong in this danger room, but,
I know he does a good job of like playing everything off with a joke, which is actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, they make Jessica go through the danger room. And unlike Doug, for example, she's had, like, significant martial arts training. She's in good shape. So, like, she can do a lot of, like, just athletic kind of, like, danger
Yeah.
room avoidance stuff. But Magneto up there at the controls kind of drops a few hints where he's like, yes, this will definitely be a true test of your abilities. And she's like,
All of your abilities.
he's like, is he on to me? He's on to her. And he eventually just, like, deploys the laser robots or whatever, right? Like, what does he eventually... No,
it wasn't
he-
him who did it. It was like
he starts with like there's like a
couple of
a
robots.
jump that's kind of a little bit too far for her to do, and she helps herself out a bit. It
right.
turns out she's extremely telekinetic, and it comes out a little bit later. Apparently, the way her powers work is that she absorbs all of this excess energy, be that heat or whatever, constantly, and her body just stores it up the way mutant powers get to do sometimes, and then she can just unleash that as telekinetic power.
Yeah. And Magneto's like, maybe you store it in like a mini pocket universe.
Well, that's
maybe
just
you
like
don't,
that's Star
I don't
Trek
know.
technobabble, right? It's like, yeah, it works somehow, whatever.
Yeah, they talk about a lot of how there's different ways of being telekinetic.
Yeah.
I just
It's,
liked
fun,
that idea.
Fun
I was like,
flavor, yeah.
I wish I had a pocket universe to store things in. That'd be
Right?
fun.
Yeah.
And so he ends up pushing her to the point where she like deploys her powers in self-defense and like is kind of like trying to tear out the first she's using her telekinesis to like pound at the like off switch at the end of the room, and she's like, let me friggin' out of here.
Right.
And like when that doesn't work, then she like really cuts loose and destroys a lot of stuff. Afterwards they're like, oh, you were trying to hit the off switch telekinetically?
She breaks through the alien
Shi'ar technology danger room
the
thing.
shield in front of the door, breaks through it, and then just rips the door apart.
And it was
to
a
get
bit
out.
of an unfortunate escalation because they rigged it, like it's set up so telekinesis doesn't turn off the room, so you can't just do that because they
Right.
were testing other telekinetics. But like she didn't know that, and they didn't know she was trying to do that, and like it's,
Right.
it gets escalated farther than it needed to.
Yeah.
And
And-
this is another thing for her to hold against Magneto, of course. Because he
Yeah.
kind of just didn't respect her wishes, keep that private. But he was like, you got to learn to control your powers because that's the premise of the
He's
X-Men.
He's Magneto, so he's like, have some pride. You know,
Right.
you're special. Let's
Right.
celebrate it.
He also, like, he kind of admits that he, like, wasn't certain what her powers were, but he suspected, based on her mother's powers and having, like...
That she had some kind of, like, control energy, something going on,
right. So it almost seems like it was more his, like, scientific curiosity that provoked it more than anything. It's interesting because his motives are just so unclear sometimes. Like, he's like, I love these kids, and you're like, do you?
I mean, he does. He also just gets very excited. There's this interesting subplot that's kind of astute after this, where, like, he trains her. He's, like, trying to work with her. He, like, tests the limits of her powers. Like, seems very excited. He's like, that was very good. Like, you held up this ridiculous amount of energy. And Danny specifically gets really resentful for her over it, where she's like, oh, yeah, Magneto's really excited. He finally has a mutant here with powers worth getting excited over. And she misdirects that anger at Jessica by being really snippy at her. And part of that is like, oh, you weren't honest with us. But part of it is really she should be chewing out Magneto for singling out Jessica as, like, the special cool kid because she has the strongest powers. And
to be fair, I mean, it's nice because you can see everyone's point of view. And Magneto's just kind of like... this is interesting.
Yeah,
and
this is really cool.
Yeah, he's just kind of focused on that, not thinking about how it might be affecting the kids. You can see Danny, like, kind of figuring out. She actually admits, she's like, I'm jealous. I think I'm just jealous.
Well, once they kind of get in a fight and hash it out, she's like, and I like Jessica's reaction where it's like, that was totally obvious. It was obvious that you were jealous. But, like, Danny in that moment is like, I'm getting in touch with my feelings here.
Yeah. It's an ugly emotion to admit having, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I was like, good for you, being able to admit that. Not only to yourself, but to another person. It was a nice moment.
Yeah. This brings up one of those kind of X-Men superhero comic things where it's like, Jessica, once this comes out, she's the most powerful person in terms of, like, a fight in the group. Maybe not most powerful, period, because Illyana can go to a hell dimension where she can travel through time at any moment. And, like, she can teleport other people there, including sometimes if they're trying not to. She's pretty cool. But, like, just in terms of, like, punching through stuff, it's like Rain turns into a wolf and, Jessica can lift, like, 1,000,000 tons and, like, create telekinetic shields and is immune to lasers.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Like, it's one of the nice things about kind of well-written superhero comics where it's like the degree of your power is not that important if your writing is good, which, it is in this fanfic. It's like you've got Superman on the Justice League next to, not even Batman, but, like, someone who's just kind of less good than Superman. Like, next to Green Lantern. Well, Green Lantern can do some own things. It's like Hawkman.
Yeah.
Like, it's like you got Superman next to Hawkman. And, in X-Men, it's like, Rachel Summers was rolling with the X-Men for a long time, and she was just, like, an equally powerful telekinetic as Jessica and a super powerful telepath. And it's just all about, like, writing stuff for everybody to do in the story, whether that is superhero stuff or character stuff or whatever. And so, like, it's not a big deal,
Well, this is...
narratively, I mean.
Yeah,
right.
Well, this is nice because... you get everybody who's already at the school really wanting to accept Jessica, but Jessica being, like, hesitant to share her powers. Like, everyone having a different reaction over the true reveal. Like, Doug is... like, everybody's basically upset, but they all deal with it in a different way.
Yeah.
Doug, like, uses a joke, but then
he admits that he was upset but makes a joke about it,
but then
right?
makes a joke, and then they resolve it because she apologizes. But then, like, this whole thing with Danny and her was just like a giant super fight.
It was a super spat.
It wasn't a super fight. They get in a fight in Danny's room and, like, she throws around her clothes telekinetically.
Yeah, Jessica, because Jessica...
she wraps her up in her own dirty clothes from the floor.
Well, yeah, she walks into the room and Jessica is established, like, kind of a clean freak. Like,
right.
So she walks into Danny's room as a total mess. And I think that's the first thing that sets her off. But she doesn't want to say anything because it's like, this is how someone else lives, but... from her perspective, she's obviously upset about it. And then the escalation happens is that she, like, lifts all the clothes off. She really wants to clean her room for her, actually. Like, that was the weirdest part.
They're in there to study. That's why they're there.
Right.
She didn't just walk in and just be like, you're messy and this is over. Like, she... like, Danny definitely started it, but she took her impulse and created an opportunity.
Yeah, she wraps her up in all her clothes. Then Magneto walks in.
Yeah, he walks in just when Danny's about to, invoke Jessica's greatest fear, which is actually probably a specifically dangerous thing to do against a powerful
yeah.
telekinetic who is not that used to using their
And
powers,
has
right?
like serious recent trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And we learn later that Danny was starting to retaliate.
Yeah,
but
that's what I was saying,
We didn't see
yeah.
that. Oh, yeah, okay.
Like, just when she was about to use her power
Yeah.
on Jessica.
Yeah.
But
But we only learn that, when they're in Magneto's office and he's chastising them both. Which is, like, the time where I felt like he was, like, the most the character we're supposed to see him as, which is just kind of, like, really paternal.
Yeah.
But very, also a little bit reserved and not exactly sure what to do with teenage girls. You know, he's like, I'm
hard for anybody.
disappointed in you both.
I remember in New Mutants
Sorry, Dad.
also where, like, he kind of leans too hard at one point into the stern disciplinarian. It's like, you can do better than this, all of you. I expect more great things from you. And like Stevie has to do like the pushback of just like, they just went through this like serious trauma shit. Like lay the hell off of them, dude.
Yeah.
Like, and he's just like, oh yeah, okay, because he's like really feeling out this like amount to which to be like a stern paternal figure, like you said, versus like trying to be like sympathetic, which he's not that great at. It's fun. It's a fun dynamic. I like this Magneto.
Yeah,
Me too.
I've had it. Yeah, I do like him too, which is why I've been thinking about him so much. Though, it's like he's likable in the sense that it's kind of what you expect like an older father to do, is to be a disciplinarian. But then I have to just like step back and criticize that a little bit and be like, you know, he's not being very empathetic to these kids, but it also seems like he's awkward about it.
Yeah,
so
the fact that he's not great about it is what
dad.
makes it so charming, right?
Right, but it's like, it's very much that dad archetype that, like, I'm not sure if I think is a good one, but
I mean,
anyway.
coming from a guy who has a history of being used to henchmen, I feel pretty proud of him.
Oh, yeah, no, much better.
Toad shows up later in this fanfic, Mortimer, whatever his name is, Graves. And, like, he's, you know, a sycophant, basically, right? And Magneto is always very respectful to him at this point. And in conversation with someone else, he's like, look, I picked up this guy, like, for my group when he was at, like, a really, you know, mentally traumatized place. And I basically enslaved him instead of helping him. And that's something I've got to live with.
Yeah.
And at this point, he's like, he kind of, like, really wants to, like, support him as much as he can, at the same time also being out of his life, because that is not a good dynamic. He was like, there's not a good dynamic for either of us.
Right.
Like,
Right.
So what happens in the story is Toad shows up at the school while Magneto is away and is, I don't know if he's threatening, but he's demanding to see Magneto, and he brought
and
like
he's got this like makeshift
spaceship.
alien. He's got like a cache of alien technology around. Don't worry about it.
Sure.
Stuff happened to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Jessica was like, "Oh my God, it's a spaceship, and it's trying to like capture me in a beam of some kind." So she like totally tears it apart.
Yeah, and then afterwards, when she meets everyone else, you're like, "Oh, we just calmed him down. Like we had just."
He's freaking out.
I was totally unclear on that, because doesn't she say something like, I didn't do anything?
Well, she was pushing back against the like
I see.
tractor beam.
Tractor beam, yeah.
And then
so
like and that caused it to break, but she wasn't like trying to break it.
No,
that's what she keeps insisting. She's like, it just fell apart. I don't know.
And then all the other kids are like, "We got to come up with a code name for you. How about Overkill?"
Well, yeah, because before this, she not only broke the danger room, but then she had another test, which was like a test of her psychic power, and she broke the meter they were using it to test her. So
yeah, the overkill ribbing is some good stuff. Where
yeah,
that's one of the ways that they kind of interact with her.
Anyway, she sort of takes it personally, and then she sort of blows it off. She knows it's how they're being friendly, but she's still like wary.
She like, doesn't. No.
Yeah, just like, that's not funny, guys.
Yeah.
Come on.
They keep pitching code names at her in one scene where they're like, "Look, if you're going to hang out with us, you need a code name, because just on the practical level, if something ends up going down, we need to be able to say something that is not like the name that you have gone by, you know."
Well, yeah, they don't know that Jessica
they don't know
Pierce
that's
is not her real name,
That's
right?
not her real name,
so they're like, "Well, we have to protect your identity," and she's thinking like, it's fine. It's like, it's honestly
they don't
fine.
actually
but she doesn't
settle
say anything at that point.
She's gone like through a million names at this point, it seems like. Or, well, not, at least 5.
Yeah.
It's interesting because they're pitching out names, and like at one point someone gets on a kick of like song titles.
Yeah.
And that's when Kid Dynamo gets thrown out. But she's also just like, no.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and it at the point we've read, it hasn't come back up. It was like mentioned
That's true,
once,
yeah.
and like never comes back up again.
Yeah, this is the title of the fic, so we sort of.
I was
have
kind of
to
expecting her to
assume-
be like, I like the ring of that, but she's just like, no.
No, she's like, no. But that's totally in her character. I
Right.
mean, yeah, not to derail us on the other discussion, but it's totally in her character to just be like, you guys are trying really hard, but I don't know. I'm hesitant.
Yeah,
She's very hesitant.
She's also just like
cautious.
not folding herself into the group completely immediately.
Yeah,
right?
well, she has a hard time trusting
Yeah.
people, you know?
Sure.
Yeah, and she's still
She's
sort
nice,
of
but-
planning on leaving, so she doesn't want to get too
Right.
attached, although she's clearly becoming attached.
Speaking of
Right.
trusting people, we can hit on one of the other big. We'll circle back around. The order of events here doesn't matter too much, but like one of the big events here that happens is that they go to a formal dance at the Massachusetts Academy, which is the one that Emma Frost runs, who is at this
Right.
point a villain, but she's a
Yeah.
villain. But she's a villain who. Well, okay, so there's two things about that, Tori. One is that she's a villain who is running her own school of young mutants.
Called the
Yeah.
Hellions.
The school's not called the Hellions. The group
No.
is called the
The group,
Hellions,
yeah.
like they're the New Mutants. The
Yes.
school is the Massachusetts Academy.
Yes.
And the other thing is that at this time, Magneto is the Black King of the Hellfire Club, which is kind of an evil organization, but he's with that kind of to have more allies against anti-mutant groups, like they kind of teamed up to fight some evil sentinel from the future and stuff. And she's the White Queen of the Hellfire Club, and it's all kind of a
Yeah.
they don't approve of each other all completely, but they're tentatively like there's a ceasefire in place. And so that's part, and the other part of it is I think just like at this point in X-Men continuity, the community of young mutants is so small that there is kind of an interest in like having people know each other rather than like being at each other's throats all the time, just kind of as like a community building sort of thing.
So
Right.
naturally, you set up a prom.
Right. But yeah, so yeah, there. Well, I guess we can get into that.
Yeah,
I
well-
was gonna say the characterization of Emma Frost is
We don't get much Emma Frost here.
interesting.
Well,
It's like she's I mean, Jessica's perspective of her is she's like an evil bitch.
I mean, that's
basically what she
pretty much
says.
what she was in the comics at that time.
I guess. Like I don't remember her being so like cold and evil.
She was
and dark,
pretty
but-
evil. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, if I remember correctly.
Huh.
That being the case, the Hellions are
She's
portrayed.
kind of like just like super powerful and like very like cold is probably good, but like more like distant than like bitchy and sarcastic. But maybe I'm wrong.
That's more like modern Emma Frost, who is probably a better character than old Emma Frost, but like,
Okay,
Not too
maybe
much you can do
that's-
with just evil.
right.
Yeah.
So
Maybe that's my like. Maybe that's my taking in.
However, the
the
characterization of the Hellions is pretty, I think, spot on to the comics, where like they're all pretty decent people, except for friggin' Empath.
Oh
like
my
that's kind
gosh.
of the like,
This
you
was
know,
a crazy curveball
Oh,
that
yeah.
they threw in here. So yeah, they go to Mutant Prom, which is like almost like Harry
Prom.
Potter style.
Yeah, it is.
Like where the like two elite schools of magic users, mutants, come together and they all dance together, but they don't really get along, you know, because they're rivals.
And we don't really need to worry about most of the Hellions, because
Right.
mostly they're like decent sorts. Some of them like kind of friendlier to the New Mutants than others. There's some crushes going on, or at least like physical attractions going on in certain
Yes.
quarters. Doug ends up like going and making out with Roulette apparently at some point. I forget her actual name, Anne Marie.
everybody's
And,
crushing
like,
on Thunderbird.
Everyone's crushing on
Yeah.
Thunderbird because he's
Yeah.
like huge and buff and hot and
Yeah.
like and he's also like friendly and nice, right?
Yeah.
As things go. But then there's Empath, who he's just the worst in the comics.
Yeah.
And he's
I
like,
didn't know it all, so I had to look this up.
no, he's terrible. Like, he's the sort of person who will just like traumatize you because you annoyed him, and he controls emotions, which is like the creepiest power.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I did not remember this character. I don't know if I ever.
He never
like-
showed up in
yeah.
Uncanny that I can remember. It's all
Right.
New Mutants.
Like I said,
Yeah.
I don't remember any of the New Mutants, even though I think I probably read some. When I found out what his power was, I was like, yeah, that's really distressing. Like, this is basically just like a character whose power is emotional abuse.
And I mean, he
And
previously
manipulation, like,
did
it-
some
like,
really
literally,
horrible shit to
yeah.
Tom and Sharon specifically,
Literally
which we
the
don't need to go into.
concept.
But like,
scared me.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, was like re-traumatizing in a way. Like hearing of the concept of his power and how he might have used it, even though the author doesn't go into specifics, it's like imagining it was terrifying.
And everybody hates him. And like, you know,
Yes.
like his teammates hate him, the New Mutants hate him, everybody hates him. Like, because he's the worst on a personal level and like on a, you know, just every level.
And here's our Jessica, and she sees him, and she knew him from childhood, I
they
guess.
were
and she's
childhood
like,
friends.
my little brother. She
Right.
runs up to hug
What's
him.
his name? Manuel?
Manuel, yeah.
Yeah.
She calls him Manuelito.
Yeah.
Yeah, Manuelito.
And he calls her by, what was that?
Oh, no, go on.
And he calls her by, what is it, her actual
Europa.
name? Europa, which was actually her birth name.
Yeah.
And like,
Oh, I thought that was like a superhero name.
no, she and her mother
Okay.
crashed with his family for like some time, and there's like a weird backstory going on there, and apparently he had a crappy, abusive father
Yeah.
as well. But anyway, they spent enough time together that like they like pledged, you know, fraternity, you know, whatever you call that, sibling.
Yeah.
Like they think of themselves as siblings.
Yeah, they like foster siblings because their parents live together and
And so they go off and have a talk, and everyone's like, look, don't go off in private with Empath. Like, that's a terrible idea. He's the worst and incredibly dangerous. And she's like, he would not do anything to hurt me. They're like, yeah, that's what you think, but he manipulates emotions. And she's like, he would not manipulate my emotions.
yeah.
I knew him before he got his powers.
Right.
Everything's fine. And she
Yeah.
goes off
Everyone's
with
like-
him.
Well, and she even
Yeah.
heard the stories of what he's done, but she still trusts him.
Yeah. She, like, can't reconcile that with the
Yeah.
person she knew. And talking to him, like, some of that comes out where it's like, you see a more vulnerable side of him. He seems to care for her, but then also in dialogue, he'll like suddenly like throughout, it's like, oh well, maybe we should kill Magneto and like run off. And she's like,
Yes.
Yeah.
like he has this very direct, uncaring, almost you know, I don't know what you would call it, like psychologically, but like his problem solving is very like what will make things best for me and the people I care about instantly right now. Right.
It's interesting because, you don't perceive any direct threat to Jessica because he seems to be genuine towards her and genuinely caring for her.
But you do get that moment where it's like, oh, he's not misunderstood. He's actually really messed up.
Yes.
And when she
you
goes
completely
back,
understand that he's willing to do anything.
and when she goes back to debrief, she's like, I think he's like really actually like
Crazy.
You know,
And they're like, duh.
like he needs mental help.
Yeah.
And she has this really distressing conversation with I think Magneto about it eventually, where he's like, yeah, here's the thing. You're probably right, and probably Emma Frost is not helping things because probably whatever mental state he's in is like one that makes him more pliable to like what she wants to do with him. And as long as he's there at the Massachusetts Academy, that's probably how it's going to stay. Like he's probably not going to improve in that circumstance and dynamic. But at the same time, no one is quite willing to go to all-out war and, you know, break this fragile truce for the sake of Empath.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of where it stands at the end of this whole crazy, like, circumstance.
He's also done so many messed up things.
Right.
And during this whole thing,
Oh, yeah, there's also, like, this other shit that goes down.
which may or may not be his fault.
Well, it is his fault. Apparently, he was trying to influence Amara, but someone also spiked the punch.
So, first let's talk about the structure of this chapter.
It's really interesting. It's interesting.
actually really good.
Yeah.
It starts as a debrief.
Right.
Which is like Magneto going like, okay, how did this shit happen?
Right.
Everybody talk me through it. And then it goes back into Jessica's reflection. And then
But it goes
it'll
back and
jump.
forth,
It'll go
right.
back and forth, to the debrief and then back into her reflection. So you kind of already know that something crazy happened. And it's all these like kind of building up pieces, like kind of like solving a crime. So spiking the punch is the first thing that we have a reveal of. Someone spiked the punch.
At
And
Mutant Prom.
at Mutant Prom. And it's affected a couple people.
And, like, Amara ends up, like, kind of going into some crazy jealous rage at, like, at Empath, at Manuel. But, like, that was apparently not intended, and, like, he was apparently probably causing her to, like, trying to cause her to fall in love with him a little bit, but then also there was, like, some sort of, like, altered state going on. And so when he steps up and he's like, no, wait, calm down, like, they end up, someone clocks him on the back of the head with something, right? Like, Rain, like, just knocks him out immediately, and, like,
to
Sheena...
prevent him from using his
And
power.
to prevent him from using his power, and Sheena Lay to teleport him out. And, like, they're like, in retrospect, he was actually probably trying to calm her down, and knocking him out was probably the worst thing we could have done at that situation. But,
Yeah.
Whoops.
you know, whenever someone starts acting crazy, the first thing you do is knock out Empath. right? So
Yeah, there you go.
there you go.
But yeah,
Can't fault him for that, really.
it's not a bad plan considering what they know of him and what he's done.
And then, magma,
but yeah, the
lava
thing
gets
is
thrown
that-
everywhere, the place gets set on fire, like, stuff is happening.
What
Luckily,
Amara
we
is
have-
doing is she's jealous because Jessica kissed Manuel in the cheeks. So she's trying to, like, kill Jessica is basically what's happening.
Anyway.
Which, considering it's Jessica, is probably the best case scenario because she just throws her into a pond, murders a bunch of ducks and fish, and puts the fire out.
Bad about the
She
ducks.
does.
She didn't think about the consequence of throwing someone like made
Boiling
of magma
into
boiling
a
into a
pond,
pond,
right.
and then she's like, "Oh no, the ducks!" And she's really sad, and I'm sad too.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure she's reliving a little bit of trauma related
Oh,
to her mom
true,
there too. She's
true.
like, oh.
Anyway, basically, the place burns down, and at the end, they're basically, like, they're jetting out of there to gather everyone together, like, everyone's safe, good. And, like, on the way out, Magneto, whoever, like, to Emma Frost, is just like, you'll clean this up, right? Thanks. And,
Yep.
like, then they take off. It's terrible. It's great.
It's weird because I'm laughing so much about that chapter now because, like, in retrospect, it's really comical, but, like, after all that heavy stuff with Empath, it almost didn't feel as comical as it is in like, the retrospect version of it.
It's, anything else we want to say about that whole sequence? It's always fun to see the Hellions because they, as a group, were killed off unceremoniously to, like, prove that somebody was dangerous at some point. And, that gets, like, it changes Emma Frost's character. That's when she has her heel face turn, is when, like, all these students under her charge get murdered. But it's just like, oh, did they ever do anything with, like, Roulette or, what's his name, Jetstream? No, not really. They just got killed.
Tarot.
Tarot. Yeah, Tarot. Tarot had really interesting powers and vaguely defined powers.
Yeah, I guess she can see the future and manifest
Manifest things from tarot cards,
figurines from her tarot cards. Why
Which
not?
is useful. How, that latter part?
They're like
Well, like,
actually
they'll
shields
fight for
and-
her or something.
Oh, they,
like,
okay.
Yeah. It's like, here,
The
fight a
Hanged
cup.
Man.
Fight 8 cups.
I think you only ever see her using the major arcana, though.
Yeah. Still, the Hanged
Still only makes sense.
8 swords
Death.
would be more useful.
There we go. Wheel of Fortune.
The chariot would be useful at some point.
Yeah,
Right.
there you go.
Anyway, another subplot going on that I want to talk about briefly is that it's established that Magneto's super charismatic and hot, right? And the only...
Pretty sure. Wait,
and the
Magneto?
Only, yes. And the
The
only...
master of magnetism.
The only other adult person around to pair him off with is
Stevie.
Stevie Wonder. Not Stevie Wonder. Stevie...
She's quite wonderful.
Stevie Hunter.
Yeah.
She seems like a decent person, but
Yeah,
she
no-
is supposed to be only 30 years old, so...
Look, whatever.
Let's put that out there just for a second.
Yeah,
But,
whatever.
but
the point
this
is...
Magneto, I might get with this Magneto if he's a little more emotionally open. He seems very closed off. Anyway, moving on.
in a, like, supervisor meeting when he calls her in to talk about something and, like, oh, and what about the situation with Jessica and, like, helping her adapt and stuff. She basically ends up asking him out on a date. And he's like, okay.
Well, he says, I have tickets to this ballet.
Yeah,
I can't go anymore.
And you're a former ballet, dancer, so probably you're interested in them, right? And she's like, okay, are you asking me out on a date?
And he was like, all right.
Well, he basically said, I thought you could take a friend, but, and then she kind of just, like, pulls him into it.
At a whim, she's just like, no, like, let's do this. Let's go see the
Yeah.
ballet.
This could be fun.
She's totally into him.
Yeah.
Who isn't? I mean,
It's the start of a romantic subplot. And, yeah, I mean, Stevie Hunter's cool. Like I said, it's weird going from this fanfic and then checking back in continuity and realizing that she was, like, just kind of dropped and forgotten about for decades. But, like,
Yeah.
at this time, it's just like, yeah, she feels important.
She seems like a really good person.
Yeah,
like
she is. And she...
for
and
him,
I really,
especially.
Yeah. She really understands him. And I also relate a lot to her and her struggle. Like, she had a knee injury and she couldn't dance anymore, and she's struggling to find an identity, having to, like, fully, at this age, at 30, realize giving up her athletic future.
Yeah.
Like, I find that to be extremely... Maybe that's just me because of my personal history. But I
No,
find it
that's always a
extremely
really interesting
relatable,
element of
you know,
people who
like-
do physical things for a living.
Yeah.
And, or, even just, like, if you're an Olympic athlete or whatever,
Yeah.
and if you
Or,
don't have an injury, still eventually you have to set it aside, right?
Yeah.
But she...
And it's hard. It's
But
really
she didn't
hard.
even get the course of her career. And so
Right.
at one
Yeah.
point in this fanfic, they're going to see the the ballet, and she tells him like, yeah, I actually haven't been to see professional ballet like since my injury, because like that's kind of a tender, thing to do emotionally. But she meets one of her old like ballet compatriots, and they catch up some.
Who's now
like
like a
superstar.
famous actress.
Yeah.
And so like
Singer or
it's
something.
very bitter, I guess. Like not that she feels bitter, but I'm not sure if bittersweet is the right word, because it's not so much the sweet, it's just like having to like face this really kind of sucky situation in her life. And she says like I basically come to peace with it, but apparently not fully, because I still haven't gone to see the ballet. And so this is kind of part of that healing process for me.
But luckily for her, her sadness is mitigated by that hot piece of Magneto sitting next to her.
That hot piece of magnetism.
That's right.
Her friend deduces, like later on when they go out for drinks, that this guy is Magneto, and has the guts to like talk to him privately and be like, does she know who you are? Like, do you have any intention of harming her? And he's like, look, she knows everything that's relevant without having to say, I am Magneto, master of magnetism, and I have no intention of harming her.
Yeah, she was bold, her friend. I was he's a super villain, or was at some point. Like, you're taking a risk here.
Like the human genocidal sort, almost.
Yeah, and you're definitely human, so...
His last big deal was just, like, threatening the world with, like, total devastation if they don't nuclear disarm and stuff. But, like, that's the last big thing he did. But even so, yeah. Even if that's not, like, murdering you face-to-face type villainy.
Yeah.
Still a big deal.
Well, it's funny, like, her friend was definitely that, like, she was, I think, a combination of archetypes. She was kind of like a Marilyn Monroe, where she was, like, apparently, like, super conventionally attractive, but Magneto found her to be immature, he specified, and just, like, he says... later, Stevie asked him if she tried to seduce him. He says, "Oh, well, she flirted with me, but I wouldn't call it seduction." Like,
he's like, I've been seduced. There's a higher quality of...
she
takes more than that
immature.
to seduce the master of magnetism.
Of course, right? But then she was also just like the protective kind of best friend, and she really wants to look out for Stevie. And she does a good job of it. She's like checking this guy out, but she's keeping an open mind. Though I don't know if I would do the same thing if my friend was going out with Magneto.
It's also...
She does all she can do, which is, I'm going to call you later, and we're going to have to talk about this.
Right.
It's also interesting because it really establishes, up until then, the main character has been Jessica. And we've gotten a lot of Magneto also. And this is the chapter that really establishes, look, Stevie Hunter is going to be probably the third-tier main character here. Like, if we've got three main characters at the end of chapter 6, it is Jessica, Magneto, and Stevie. And that's interesting because I don't feel like there's a whole lot of Stevie Hunter-focused fanfiction out there.
I'd never heard of her before this, honestly.
I felt like the author really related to her because, I don't know, like, they bring so much of her into it, and, like, I really related to her reading this, but I don't know...
Well, she's a human, which is nice, as, like, a viewpoint kind of character. She's just kind of having to roll with some of the shit that goes down, and she's an adult, which we are at this point. So, like, that helps, too.
It might have
with
just
those
been...
superpowered punches.
Like I said, it might have just been that I related to her being this, like, the same age as me and
you've
having
had athletic
similar
injuries,
experiences. Yeah, like having had my first injury at 18 and having to give up a lot of stuff because of that. But at the same time, whether that's something you share or not, the fact the author was able to describe it in a way that I could relate to so well felt really real. So I think that's definitely a strength.
I agree.
I also noticed that chapter, that was 5B, right?
4B.
4B.
Yeah.
It was
4A.
That was 4.
Actually.
That was
Oh,
4A?
yeah,
Really?
you're
There
right,
was
it is
chapter
4A.
4, and then there was chapter 4A.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
yes.
And
it
the
was
reason I
interesting.
know this is because I skipped 4A the first time because I thought it was like some sort of redundancy.
Oh, yeah.
But I went back and read it, and the fanfic doesn't lose anything without it, but it does gain something when you
It adds
get
some
it
depth,
there.
but
Yeah.
it's not essential to the plot.
No, it's not essential to the plot.
So far.
but-
And I assume the author's reasoning also there was that that's the only chapter that just is not from Jessica's perspective at all.
Right.
Not in the slightest, not
Right.
for a single moment.
That's when that's when I started that one. I was like, wait a second. How does Jessica know this is happening? Then I had to think back and remember that it wasn't all entirely in her perspective, but it mostly is, so.
And then the last main plot thing, things like Mutant Prom or Stevie Magneto date, those have been like wrapped up in a single chapter, right? But chapter 6 introduces a plot thread a plot line, that is multi-issue, multi-episode. And that is Asgard dealings, which is interesting.
Right.
That's actually one of the New Mutant storylines I'm more familiar with than others, because it was across an Uncanny X-Men annual and New Mutants annual that like this whole Asgard stuff kind of happened to everybody. And so it's compiled in my Essential X-Men volumes alongside the X-Men because you need the other half of the story, right? And so like I've read all of New Mutants once, and I've read that maybe 1.5 more times. So I remember that a little bit better than most things. But they get pulled back into Asgard shenanigans. What happens where they end up dressing Jessica in Storm's clothing? That's kind of how this all starts out.
Right, yeah. She like totally tries to do the hair and the jacket and everything.
And this is Storm in the era where she was very punk and had a mohawk.
There's a couple things that happen. And the first thing that happened is back in the Danger Room, she got her hair burnt off, and she's not super happy with her hair.
Right.
Yeah, because she forgot to protect her hair from her own, like, from the fire, even though she's fireproof, her hair isn't.
And apparently that's happened before, but not for a long time, because she tried not to use her powers,
Right. She's like, oh, dang it.
But yeah, the like aura that protects her body only extends like a little bit.
Right.
Her
Off
hair
her
and her
skin.
clothes
hair,
are
yeah.
affected, but yeah.
And the
Not her
other
body.
thing is that she needed new clothes, and she got a bunch of Storm's clothes because Storm was, like, closer to her size.
They're both tall.
Yeah,
Tall,
they're
thin,
both tall. Like,
not
she frequently
particularly,
mentions that they don't fit her as well because she's, like a skinny 17-year-old, but she still wears them. And that kind of demonstrates some of her insecurity. She's like, I'm never going to look as hot as Storm does in these pants, but at least they're cool. So she puts on these, well, they say jeans, but then they also say leather, so I'm going to assume they're leather pants.
Yeah, leather pants sounds right for what Storm was wearing around
they
then.
keep saying jeans. I'm like, jeans means denim, so they've got to be leather pants. Anyway, she puts
Leather
on these
X
leather
jeans.
pants.
Basically, they're
Unstable molecules.
They're getting ready to go to the mall. She starts trying to put on like fancier clothes because everybody's getting dressed up, and then it turns into this like
This whole dress up thing.
This
where
whole
everyone's like,
dress-up
let's see
thing.
how like punk we can
Team
make you
thing,
with.
her
Yeah.
friends.
And so
they
like they
go
give her
and, like-
shades, they give her like a mohawk
Yeah.
of some kind somehow, don't they?
Yeah, she gives herself.
Oh yeah, because she can hold up her hair telekinetically
Right.
without having to
she
deal with.
doesn't want anyone to put mousse in her hair because she says like, I don't want that stuff to stay in my hair, and I'm like, it only stays in there until you like wash it out. I don't know why you're so worried about it. But yeah, she straightens her own hair because it's curly. And
showers
sticks
are
up
for
in the mohawk.
humans. So,
I guess, yeah.
but Doug and Danny are like parading her through the house, and they go into the kitchen, and Magneto and Stevie are in there. And they
then
like
they're
jump
like,
away from each other like awkwardly, and
Right.
they have this awkward
Yeah.
moment. And then
And then some asshole flunky of Loki's basically pops in
Yeah.
with some dimension hopping artifact. He's trying to kidnap Storm, apparently. And
No,
this
Storm hasn't shown up there this entire fan.
Yeah, oh, that's the
so-
thing. The X-Men, they just keep mentioning, look, the X-Men are off doing something.
Yeah.
some headquarters,
seen
is what she says at some point.
I'm wondering if before the end of all of this, they're going to show back up.
I hope they do. It'd be really fun if they did.
Anyway, she looks kind of like Storm in this era. Back in the crossover, Loki had basically tried to, I don't know, set up and brainwash Storm to be like a Mjolnir wielding, like, you know, queen of some kind. Like they forged another one because like Storm powers and stuff. I don't remember.
Cool though.
But I think she had a decently cool outfit. I mean, Storm with a hammer is just a general concept I can get behind.
Totally.
So that's who this little jerk flunky is going after.
And
But
it's really bad timing.
bad timing
Yeah.
when he tries to teleport back to Asgard, and this all happens really quickly. Like, I think Jessica, maybe Magneto tried to use their powers against it, doesn't quite work. What ends up happening is that he grabs Jessica, and also Doug and Danny.
It's a weird explanation.
And Magneto.
Well, Magneto and Stevie also get pulled through, but they're sort of like dropped partway through the interdimensional teleportation.
Yeah.
Magneto figures out that he needs to express his power in a way that can subvert it's like the way it traps the mutants and breaks himself free, and then and Stevie is not affected at all. She's just like pulled through and then just starts to fall, I guess.
Well, like they break free of that pull after they're already out of Earth's dimension, out of Midgard,
Right.
and so they're somewhere, and so we have a subplot there with Stevie and Magneto trying to survive somewhere outside of Midgard. They're implicitly probably somewhere in like the Asgardian, Norse mythology realms, but it's not clear where.
Because he was forced to make a choice: do I follow the kids,
or do I save
Stevie, who's going
to?
Yeah.
So
and he makes that choice. He doesn't go into his reasoning. I feel like you could read it like romantically, but I think the idea is like they have handled themselves in a lot of crazy situations and have powers. She is literally falling to her death at this very moment.
One situation has time, the other one doesn't really at all.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though, like, they're the kids that he's the responsible adult for, he still in that moment has to, like, save the life right there.
Yeah.
Because he realizes he also has a responsibility towards Stevie as being a mutant versus a human, so...
And so
with the chapter 4A, you kind of have the romantic context there too,
as well.
So,
But they get to like do a little survival stuff and
it's romantic.
He pulls some minerals out of the ground to make a shelter out of. It's romantic. You get the trope where it's like it is very cold and we need to sleep next to each other for warmth, and I only have enough magnetic material in my cape for one blanket.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like an explanation that he can't keep it warm while he's asleep.
Oh, yeah, right. He can
just
heat
a
it up
lot of things. He can heat it up, but not when he's asleep.
But when I'm sleeping, we need body warmth. And she's like, well, then.
So there's some silliness there. I don't fully get the explanation, though, of like why they even state like... that Jessica doesn't look like Storm other than having her clothes.
Yeah, no.
So Doug makes the joke that it was her jeans that he was looking for, Geans, instead of like Genes, jeans. And it's like, that is literally the most logical explanation because there's no other one.
Well, it seems to just be that this guy was incompetent. That seems to be the explanation.
Yeah, and that's his explanation.
Someone else comments...
He misspelled the jeans word.
No.
He which
just
isn't obviously
Doug
isn't
joke.
true.
He just got a vague physical description of just like, look, the one with the mohawk and like, this kind of
leather
outfit.
pants.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was like, got it. And
as it happens to be, they dressed her up that day.
One of them also complains, like, Doug or someone also complains, don't they know the X-Men haven't been, like, even around in the mansion for, like, a month? Like,
yeah. Like,
they didn't do their homework.
Pretty ridiculous how it all goes down.
So they were...
But you don't question it that much, because it's, comics.
They're pulled into Loki's court, basically. And, Loki is the ruler of a realm.
Well, to finish with Magneto and Stevie, they're stuck in this place that's quite small, but it's kind of... It's like...
It's one of those, like, labyrinth areas,
yeah, it's
right?
like a labyrinthine kind of weird thing, and they don't know how to get out.
They keep trying to travel. They describe it as a Mobius strip, where they just keep coming back around to the same spot.
Right. And Magneto has a dream where he's speaking with Firefall, which is Jessica's mother, who says several things, one of them being, Stevie's a nice woman, take care of her. And then she said something about... escaping through the hole, or something about look for the holes in the sky or something like that. So I'm assuming that's how they're going to escape. But as of right now, they're stuck.
Yeah.
So
as of the end of chapter 6.
Yeah.
And so Loki's court. They end up in Loki's court, have some dialogue. Loki can speak English, but this is also kind of a time in the fanfic where Doug gets to be super useful because he speaks Norse. Like, he speaks ancient Asgardian Norse fluently, like he does everything else as well.
Yeah.
But they've got these, like, not collars, they got something on them, right? Like...
Well,
whatever trapped them also, like, collared them, so if they use their powers,
they cannot actively use their powers,
right?
Is the thing. And so Doug's okay, but, like, the other two can't manifest their powers without it, like, choking them.
It's only specific powers, like, that choke them. It's only offensive powers.
It's only... It seems to be only things that they're actively invoking. That was my read on it.
The way I saw it, or I thought it was explained, was Jessica says that she can use her ability to feel things out because it's an internal power, but anything that is forced out externally is caught by this kind of... choke collar that they have on.
One of the neat details about her telekinetic use is that she can just sort of, like, feel around. It's kind of like just like patting an area, like except telekinetically, so like she can feel basically where things are.
She's drawing energy from the air around
but
her.
not,
She can
not
feel
at a
the
granular
She won't
level.
like get choked because she's heat proof or anything. Like so yeah, anything passive is not a choking offense.
Which is why Doug's okay.
Yeah, we actually get a little more on this after chapter 6, but I'm not gonna say because that's spoilers.
Yeah, you read ahead.
So.
Against my express orders.
So sorry. Just trying to get a jump. But anyway, yeah, it seems like anything passive is not affected by the collars.
And so Loki's stance, he was expecting Storm. He was hoping for a Storm, but he was like, "Oh no, my incompetent, disobedient, flunky who did this thing against my express wishes because I swore not to interfere with the X-Men or New Mutants again."
I have nothing to do with this. And you're like, Loki.
It seems like all he needs is plausible deniability, and it seems like he needs plausible deniability for like magical reasons. It's like he can't be like proven or obviously an oath breaker, or else like that's kind of like karmically bad in Asgard, or like bad for him maintaining his magic or stature or stance or something.
Like, kids do something kind of clever. I don't remember specifically who it was, but they're like, "Oh, we're going to be your honored guests."
Right. Since it was an accident, you were my honored guest, right? And he's like, and he's in front of his whole court. And he's like, "Yes, of course you are my honored guests." And they're like, "Great, can you take off these like things to prevent us using our powers?" And he's like, "I wish I could, but I don't know how they work, and I just killed that guy for disobeying me who made them. Oops."
He transported him, to be fair, but he's like, I just can't get him back.
Right.
He's just gone now. You're like,
And so he's like, it's going to take me some time to figure that out. You'll just have to stay here until then. And you get the feeling that Loki's just winging it at this point. He doesn't have anything he wants these kids for, but he doesn't want to just let them go. Like, they're probably going to be useful for something. So, like, he's keeping them around. And, at least his wife, who, obviously is not a fan of Loki from
wife.
from North Smith, right?
Yeah.
She's like, "Look, I'm going to be a good hostess to you and set you all up and stuff."
Yeah. So they're pretty comfy. They go to, like, parties every night.
And
Doug recites Bob Dylan.
Yeah, Bob...
in Old Norse, and everybody loves it.
Right. Doug gets on a roll as a bard because he can just do perfect, beautiful translations of anything. And so, like, any song lyrics he has at least mostly memorized, he just kind of does. At one point, there's a throwaway comment where she's like, "Yeah, you haven't lived until you've heard Alice's Restaurant performed in, like, Old Norse for, like, a raving audience."
This is, like, the third or fourth time we've gotten a sense of the author's musical taste, because there was even something where they were at a club dancing, and the song that they were dancing to was, like, I think it was Rock Lobster or something.
Oh, that sounds right.
Like, well, it's just a song about crustacean. I can't remember if that was what it was
sounds
supposed
right,
to be or not. But it was, like, very antiquated for the 90s. This is written in 92. So the author's musical taste is pretty
Who is the song
school.
Kid Dynamo by? I don't know.
Oh, I don't remember. But yeah, so we got Alice's Restaurant, like Arlo Guthrie.
I totally buy that Doug specifically is into, like, old folk
rock.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a lot of what the author mentions is their musical references, and they seem to think they're important because, who is Kid Dynamo by? Or the song that makes that reference.
Isn't that the title of a song?
I think it is the title of a song, but I don't remember for sure.
Well, we do have access to the internet here.
In any case, Doug becomes kind of a little celebrity.
Yeah,
like it
says like
cute.
A representative from the Bardic, guild immediately came and made him an honorary member, just to like, or like a full member, I should say, just to get like.
Yeah, they pin a little harp thing on him, and
the Buggles.
Oh yeah, the Buggles.
Who are the Buggles?
Yeah, what?
60s rock group.
Okay, well there you go.
Pop rock, but
Anyway,
almost psych, I guess, but more pop maybe.
Yeah,
the time when pop and psych were kind of the same.
They're all kind of like trying to figure out a way to escape because they're like, if everybody back at Xavier's had been able to track us, if they could have figured out where we went, they would already have teleported here through Limbo. Like, Ilyana would be here already with the cavalry. And so the fact that they're not already here means that they don't know where we are, which means that we really need to, like, get out of here ourselves.
They also know that it's difficult to leave or enter Asgard, and they're going to have to figure out a way out themselves, and they don't know where Magneto is. at this time.
They've got allies elsewhere, though. At one point, Danny's like, I don't want to get the Valkyries involved in this, and I'm like, I'm not sure why. It's like
maybe you should though.
Like absolutely, you should. I don't know.
Whatever your problem is, like maybe you should just.
Yeah, she was a little reluctant, I think, to be drafted into the I forget the details, but even so, it's like, look, you're kind of imprisoned by the Lord of Lies here, so maybe just take whatever help is available.
True.
Instead, they go and outfit themselves in armor and get some weapons.
Yeah.
To prepare for what comes next.
And it's also interesting, some weapons and armor, right? It's also interesting, they give a little background. It's like, look, there's a lot of like normal people living in Asgard, and like Loki's actually like the king of his own area, and he has a whole court here. And even though on Earth it's like, oh, that's a supervillain, here they're just like, yeah, whatever, that's our lord, he's fine, I guess. Like everyone, his actual subjects seem like pretty neutral towards him, not like, Victor Von Doom level of worship, but like...
But they're so stuck right now. They're like, if only we could get to Thor.
Right.
But we can't get anywhere right now. So, stuck in Loki's mini kingdom.
And that's basically where we end the first half of the fanfic that we read. That was about 75,000 words. It's another 75,000 words-ish to the end of the fanfic. And for the very first time, as I said, we're stopping in the middle. So I'd like to ask what predictions you two in particular have. I remember a few things, though honestly I don't remember how the fanfic ends, like, at all. But, like, for example, any developments you expect to happen in Asgard, shall we say?
Well, it's weird. I mean, I did read ahead a little bit, but I don't think that gives me actually that much more room to play here. I don't know how long the Asgardian arc is going to last. Like, that's what I'm confused about, is we've got another half of the book, and I could predict that...
And up until now, nothing's lasted that long in terms of, like, an event.
So we could just dip from Asgard at any time, and some new plot point could come in. Or we could stay in Asgard a long time. I think either could happen. I do think that character moments are going to be the bigger things. My hope is that with Jessica, she kind of opens up to the other characters and decides to become one of the New Mutants, and because it seems where it's heading.
We've got to have a full reconciliation with Magneto at some point, right? Because that's such a huge theme in this.
Absolutely.
And
as far as the Asgardian plotline goes, I'm well aware of my own ignorance as far as all of the plotlines that have actually happened, so I don't know if I can specifically say what my predictions are on that, but yeah, there are a lot of kind of general arc things that I expect to happen. A confrontation with Magneto, and I do suspect, and I could be totally wrong, that she is his daughter through Firefall. I think that's a possibility. And
definitely.
It would be interesting to have Empath come to the rescue at some point.
You've got to do something with Empath, because that was such a strong plot thread.
Maybe Empath v. Loki would be interesting.
I mean, you have to, just narratively. Like, you can't introduce that as, like, such an important relationship in her life and such a, fraught situation, and you can't not return to it for the other half of the story.
Whether or not it's pretty or ugly, it's going to have to happen narratively, I think. Or it's just going to be a really weird thing that they dropped in and then left off.
Well, I don't fully agree with that, just for the fact that the structure so far has been a lot of,
episodic
cameos. Yeah, very episodic.
That wasn't a cameo, though. That was a plot hook.
Sure, yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that I don't think you have to return to the character because, it does, so far, you had Toad come in and you had other people come in. I understand that that's really important to Jessica's life, but I feel
Toad was like an uncle, actually. They knew each other since she was little.
I meant Empath.
And no, I'm just thinking. Actually, doesn't she mention I think I met Toad once when I was a kid or something?
Yeah,
probably.
She did.
I mean, her mom was running with that crowd, so
right.
It makes sense. But as far as the rest, I assume there's going to be a consummation, if you will, to some degree of a romantic relationship with Magneto and Stevie.
Oh yeah,
of course. I hope and I think that the X-Men will show up at some point.
I'm hoping to, and I don't remember at all. But, I don't remember a lot from the second half of this fanfic. I remember very little, in fact, which is good for this moment. But, it's you'd kind of expect them to, show up in the last chapter, right? Because, the fanfic is very, very clearly not about them. but they're also kind of a looming presence in the background, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
They're who the kids look up to.
Especially
They're-
Storm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because Storm is
It would be
Jessica's favorite.
cool if they, it would be cool if they showed up.
And Claremont's
I
favorite.
mean, Storm's awesome.
Yeah, Storm's great.
She's amazing.
She's everybody's favorite. But anyway, that would be cool. But yeah, just in terms of wrapping everything around with Jessica, as I was saying, like, I feel like, is CJ bring up a good point. She's going to have some reconciliation with Magneto somehow. Him being her dad would be really interesting, but I also feel like it's not necessary, so we'll see how it goes.
It's not. So I'm happy either way.
But I think the most important reconciliation is going to be, like, her dealing with her mom's death. And I really hope the author, like, finds a way to deal with that, because it's obviously affecting her a lot, but it's just going on in the background. And like I was saying before, that I hope she finds community with this group of people that she's connected with.
I think that's how it's
because
got
I
to
think,
end.
Yeah, I think that's the goal, is that she finds community here.
I would not be
and
surprised
stay here.
if at the very end of the fanfic she takes on the codename Kid Dynamo as a sign that she is with the group now and she has a code name.
Right. Yeah.
And that, like, I would expect it, like, not to make another appearance for another 5 chapters, and then just, like, come back around to it at the very, very end.
So we'll see.
Are you looking forward to reading more?
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. Like, I don't really know where it's going to go, and I find that pretty exciting. So.
Yeah, I remember enjoying reading it a lot as a kid, and I feel like it might be the first fan work that I encountered in this form, which is to say, long novel style and already 100% complete before I ever encountered it. And so, I remember being really impressed, like, whoa, is this like, really cool fan fiction novel, like, floating on the internet? And I'm happy that it's living up to my memories of it. It's about exactly as good as I remembered it being, which is pretty good. Like, it's entertaining and, mostly really well written. And I'm not enough of a New Mutants expert to say if anyone's being ill-served characterization-wise, but mostly just feels like it doesn't have time for everybody, right?
Right.
Like, it doesn't have time to give a lot of, screen time to Sam or Rain or Amara or the people who are not appearing or whatever.
Yeah, but it does do a good job giving a little bit of,
everybody gets to be there. Right.
Yeah.
I just mean, like, I don't know if a hardcore New Mutants fan would have, like,
No.
serious issues with someone's characterization here or something.
Oh, I see.
I'm sure that's
I don't
probably
know.
the case for
Probably.
somebody, but I feel
Someone's
very
probably like,
happy.
Danny would never act that way.
Right.
But I just don't remember well enough to actually say one
Yeah.
way or the other.
And coming mostly from the outside, in the case of, these characters, I feel pretty happy. I feel like there's a lot of cohesion and continuity for all the characters, so...
I've also like to point out the author clearly likes all the characters.
Yeah.
The author is definitely not, like, ragging on
Yeah.
anybody or, like, trying to,
Oh, yeah.
make
yeah.
anybody seem not cool or nice or, or interesting or whatever.
The author's actually being really generous to everyone, like, trying to make everybody
I feel like
likable.
Even
Those-
the
those-
master of magnetism.
Those little
Exactly.
touches, like you mentioned, everybody kind of being a little bit upset with Jessica. Not everybody, but to varying extents or in various ways, being a little bit upset with Jessica after, like, she hid her actual powers from them. It's like they're allowed their own kind of personhoods in a lot of ways.
Right.
And it's not like the author gets to spend that much screen time on it, but, like, little things like that, or everyone kind of having their own thing going on at Mutant Prom, just helps everybody. It's not actually called Mutant Prom in the fanfic, by the way. It's just like
It's just
some
called-
sort of formal dance
It's
event.
just called Mutant Prom in my heart.
Right.
Yeah.
Things like that just kind of help feel everybody be really present, which is
Well-
a tricky thing to do in a large cast.
I think the reason it does is because we get so much from Jessica's perspective. It almost feels like, the narrator is Jessica most of the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't just feel that way. That is the case. But where it's going with it feels like almost like the author is really relating to Jessica the most. So the fact the author gives those moments, like, Jessica might even be a form of self-insertion. It almost feels.
This
with
is definitely
her-
not. This is the kind of character who on internet fan communities talking ill about fan fiction, you might get the term Mary Sue thrown at her, right? I don't think that's fair,
No.
but at all. Like, I think she's actually a well-realized character, and I think that in lots of ways. And I think her power level is not the significant thing. Because like I said, that it's superhero comics, her power level does not make her dominate events in the fanfic anymore. And, you know, whatever.
Yeah, no,
but I don't... She could be a self-insertion in that we don't know how similar the author's background or personality is to her. That wouldn't be like a self-insertion in the real formal sense, but like an author avatar type thing, right?
Yeah.
But if that's the case, I don't think it matters much, because we're introduced to Jessica so clearly as a character in this context that, like, you know, who cares? The author can be like her, or the author can be completely unlike her. It doesn't really...
Yeah.
At the very least, she's written to be a teenage girl, and teenage girls are teenagers in general are, you know, social relationships are really important to them, and it's written that way, and it made it very believable for me, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and there's just a lot of, like, fun dialogue from her perspective, or not even dialogue, like monologue, like the descriptions from Jessica's point of view are pretty fun and make her character come to life, which is why I would say it could be an author self-insertion, just because her character is so alive. But if it's not, I think it's even more impressive that this character is so brought to life through her dialogue or her personal perspective.
I wish I could have found anything else about this author, but they do not seem contactable on the internet. They seem to have disappeared long ago. In any case, we'll find out more about how the fanfic is concluded next week. We're going to finish reading it and come back. The fanfic then will be chapters 7 through 12 of Kid Dynamo. You can find the link there at bit.ly/rfrdynamo, Dynamo. And this week was the same fanfic, episode 75, except we did chapters 1 through 6. And apropos of nothing, the New Mutants film is supposed to come out in April of 2020, assuming it's not delayed again, like it was 2 or 3 times already.
Knock on wood.
There we go.
Also, according to Wikipedia, they originally had a post-credit stinger featuring John Hamm as Mr. Sinister, and they cut that, and they had someone else to be a different villain.
What?
Why would you cut John Hamm as Mr. Sinister?
Yeah,
that is
right?
perfect.
I mean,
Poor decision.
yeah, he'd be great.
I would watch the movie just for that. No, I would watch the movie just for Liliana, but
He's
I would
such a
also look
good-
forward to John Hamm as Mr. Sinister.
Have you all seen, like, John Hamm as a villain? He's a great villain.
Do you
And, like,
hear that,
everything
Hollywood?
He plays a villain in. He's such a good villain. Oh my god.
The intro song is The Weekly Fare off of the album Popey's Incredible Adventure by Komiku. The outro song is Run Against the Universe from the same album. You can find that album and other works by Komiku at loyaltyfreakmusic.com. You can find our website at retrofanficretrospective.podbean.com or bit.ly/retrofanfic. If you have questions, comments, or thoughts about the episode, please contact us on Twitter at retrofanfic, Facebook at retrofanfic, Reddit at fanficretrospective. We've got the Instagram retrofanfic also, which I have not really learned how to use yet. Or send us an email at retrofanficretrospective@gmail.com. You can also leave comments or reviews on whatever service you use to listen to podcasts, and those would be appreciated also. I'm Amato.
I'm Tori.
And I'm CJ.
We're just 3 Earth life forms trying to be nice to each other in a world that hates and fears us. Until next time, take care.
Galen and I are
think I
rewatching
gotcha.
Evangelion
Okay.
so that we can watch the new Evangelion.
What new event? Like, is there another new
Well,
movie? The last new
relatively-
movie coming out?
Relatively new.
The movies?
Yeah. Like I've seen the older movies, but not the ones that came out most recently. So.
I saw the
Oh,
second
yeah.
movie with Galen back when I was living in Japan. It's taken them forever,
He told
Oh,
me
I
that,
know.
yeah.
like in theaters.
Getting this clipping.
Yeah, he was like, it's been a while. It better be good. I was like, I'm sure it will be, but
Well, a third one came out in between, but Yeah, I think the fourth one is supposed to finish it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if they're ever gonna come out with that. It's just been forever. Isn't like it's all.
Well, the
When
thing
did
is,
the first one come out? Like 10 years ago now? Seems like it.
yeah, definitely 10 years. The second one came out 10 years ago.
Yeah.
The first one came out in 2007,
Really?
apparently, according to the
Oh
internet
my
here.
gosh. Didn't seem
Because I
like
was
it
in
actually
Japan
been
10 years
that
ago.
long. Oh my gosh. That's nuts.
So Evangelion 3. Oh, Evangelion 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 3.0 plus 1.0 is the name of the fourth one.
Yeah. That's not real.
Why not? That's amazing.
Sure.
It's equivalent to Evangelion 4.0.
Yeah. Is it though?
Yeah, no, mathematically.
Right.
Yeah.
3 point. Okay.
Yeah.
I hear you.
There you go.
Yeah. As long as the math adds up, that's all good. Okay.